All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us this morning. I know everyone has busy schedules, but this will be well worth it, we promise. So we have about 31 folks on the line. Appreciate you joining. We'll have a couple more joining throughout. So we really appreciate it. So since COVID-19 and everything that has ensued, eBay has launched a series of webinars in order to help keep our seller base and user base informed of everything that's going on from the local, state, and federal levels. We've had a couple over the last few weeks. 2 weeks ago, we had a representative from one of the small business development centers to talk through how small businesses can use their resources and how they can approach the SBA programs throughout all of this. So as part of that webinar series, we're very excited today to have Congressman John Curtis join us. Thank you very much, Congressman, for taking the time.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just really pleased to be with you today.
Perfect. So I'll just run through a little bit about eBay and the company, and then I'll do a quick introduction of the Congressman, and then we'll turn it over to you for some remarks, and then we'll have a good Q&A section at the end. Thank you to everyone who have provided questions in advance. If anything pops into your mind throughout this and you want to ask a question, please email government_relations@ebay.com, and we will do our best to address that during this time. But for all of our users and for Congressman, as you may know, eBay is in its 25th year of operation. So in the tech world, we're one of the old guys. But our model of connecting buyers and sellers as a true third-party marketplace is more successful than ever. We are anchored and based on the wonderful small businesses that sell on our platform, as well as all the individuals that are selling one-off items as they see fit. At any given time, there are 1.4 billion listings on eBay. So a couple of things. Our internal motto is you can find whatever your version of perfect is on eBay. So as it relates to Utah's 3rd congressional district, which you represent, there are over 870 small businesses in your district that sell on eBay. About 156,000 active users, so almost a quarter of your district are actively using eBay. And very close, just on the other side of your border, we have an incredible facility in Draper where about 2,000 Utahns work, many of which live in your district. So we appreciate you taking the time today. I worked on Capitol Hill for a very long time and had the distinct pleasure of working with Congressman Curtis and his excellent staff. Absolute pleasure to work with, and they are the best in town. So for all the Utahns, you are very, very lucky. Congressman Curtis, as I mentioned, proudly represents Utah's 3rd congressional district in the United States Congress. And his district includes Salt Lake, Utah, Emory, Carbon, San Juan, Grand, and Wasatch counties. So a good mix of urban and rural. He and his wife, Sue, have 6 children and 8 grandchildren. The 8th was just born last week.
Just a couple days ago, yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congressman Curtis is known for his personal approach to government and has been named the #1 top elected official on social media by the Government Social Media Group and recognized by Forbes for his commitment to citizen engagement. Since being elected to Congress in November of 2017, he has passed 7 bills into law, sponsored 30 bills, co-sponsored 269, and this is incredible, held more than 177 town halls and has covered over 25,000 miles in his favorite socks, which he is classically known for. not to underscore it anymore, but he is a wonderful member, and Utah is very lucky to have him. So, Congressman Curtis, over to you.
Well, thank you. It's so good to be with you this morning. I might just note that Brian Fahey has joined us. He works with me out of Washington, D.C., and will help me answer some of your questions. A couple of thoughts, and then we really want to spend the most of our time answering your questions. I have very fond memories of eBay, maybe not 25 years ago, but probably 23, 22 years ago. I remember my business partner coming in and telling me that he had lost some silverware out of this very important set of silverware, and that there was actually a way that you could go out on the internet and find a couple of pieces of silverware. And that concept 22 years ago was just, it blew blood vessels in my mind. Like, how does that happen? So I jumped in and got an eBay account, which is how he was doing this. And for the first time, really discovered what it was like to be able to connect with somebody who might want something I have or have something that I want on a really broad basis, besides just literally advertising in the newspaper and in the classified section. And it was for me, being early on, understanding that was an amazing thing. Now we just take it for granted, but really a strong memory in my mind. Second thing I'd like to share is how much respect I have for small businesses. I owned a small business. My father owned a small business. My grandfather owned a small business. My daughters own small businesses. In my district, small businesses represent upwards of 95% of all business. And I've said a number of times through this pandemic that it won't be government that leads us out of the pandemic. It will be small businesses. And I was so pleased to support both of the major bills in Congress that brought relief to our small businesses. And I speak for many of my colleagues that we all viewed that as the most important part of the large amounts of money we spent. Really what we did for our small businesses, I think, resonated with most of us the strongest, and what brought our really almost unanimous support to these bills. And so thank you. I know as a small business owner that you struggle sometimes to keep the lights on, that you struggle to make payroll. And this is one guy who has experienced that myself, and just really have a great appreciation for what you do. So with that, Matt, let's jump in and answer the questions, and happy to really answer anything you've got today.
No, that's perfect. Thank you very much. And again, with your background as a small business owner and previously serving as mayor of Provo and now as an elected official in the United States Congress, uniquely positioned in order to address these issues. And so these questions that we're going to read through come through a mix of some of our small businesses, some of our general users, sort of one-off sellers, and then as well, we have a couple of folks on our line from our eBay facility there in Utah. And so we have a good mix today. The first question: Congress has passed a couple of stimulus packages to try to help the economy, small businesses, and our frontline workers. What did you like and dislike about those packages, and what would you like to see in future packages?
Well, first of all, let me acknowledge that Congress literally came together in a couple of days and passed a major bill, and like I said, near unanimous in both the House and the Senate. That's the first thing that I liked, is we don't do anything that quickly in Congress. And it really was quite a statement that this was bipartisan, and that we knew that we had a mission and we need to fulfill it. Now, obviously, when we move that quickly, there's going to be problems, and we're going to miss things, and things will be misinterpreted. So unfortunately, the bill's not perfect. We know that. We knew that when we passed it. But the alternative of waiting, I mean, literally, if you could try to get this bill perfect, you're going to wait decades, right, before you could put it together. And so my team and Brian and congressmen and their teams all around the country literally have been spending 24/7 trying to help small businesses figure out how to take advantage of it and figure out where we miss things, how to cover for those. And that's what I probably regret most about the bill, is that there are imperfections with it. There are people that are left out in certain categories. And yet the sheer task of moving quickly and the importance of moving quickly almost made that a necessity.
Perfect. And Congressman, to your point of you and your staff providing the resources and trying to advocate, how can your constituents learn more about what you're doing and what your staff are doing?
Great. We're doing a weekly teletown hall. The next one will be Thursday. On our website, curtis.house.gov, you can queue into how to call into those. We have a newsletter that we send out, and literally our staff is taking phone calls as quickly as they're coming in, trying to get to every single phone call. So if you're not getting your answer, please call in. You can get the phone numbers at curtis.house.gov. And right now, we believe mission number one is helping people deal with the pandemic, getting past this, and especially our small businesses.
Perfect. Next question comes to us. The direct cash payment that Congress approved is nice to have, but at the end of the day, it's not a lot of money. Do you think Congress should or will approve more direct cash payments?
Well, let me just say, and this kind of goes back to my first point, we had to act with such little information. And today we really just don't have very much information about how long this is going to last and who it's really impacting and who's going to recover the quickest from it. So many of us right now feel like, look, we've put almost $4 trillion out there. We need to now see how it's being used, who's using it, and where our weaknesses are. And you saw us respond rather quickly, and it's relative, right, quickly for Congress, to the fact that we ran out of money for the PPP. And we saw that, we didn't anticipate it, we put that together, and so we came back together and here again in near unanimous fashion put more money into that. So I believe what you'll see from Congress is, first of all, waiting to see more about how what we did is helping, and who's recovering, who's not recovering, and who needs additional help. Now, here's the tough thing. We wrote checks for this from a bank account that didn't have the funds, right? And so it may be true that we know people are suffering, and it may be true that we should come forward and help. But at some point, we reach the capacity, right, to not be able to issue any more checks from the account where we don't have money. And this personal money that came forward may be one of those categories. We'll have to see. It really depends, I think, where Congress sees the most pain and has the ability to make the most difference. And so I think really the only answer to that question is it's a little too early to see whether or not we need to put more money into that. And it depends with the competing needs. What's really the hottest item. It was the small business category on this last bill. It may be that category again.
Perfect. We're going to ask you to pull out your crystal ball here a little bit. So the late breaking news, right? Congress won't be coming back into session next week. You'll eventually go back, right? All the other members will eventually go back. Can you, to the best of your ability, kind of walk through what the summer and fall leading up to the elections will or could look like for Congress?
So I'm laughing because just yesterday we got word we would be back Monday, and we actually booked tickets, started to make those arrangements, told my wife, hey, I'm gonna be out of here next week. As you just mentioned, the last breaking news is that we won't be back next week. And that shows the enormity of the task of looking into the crystal ball. Let me just tell you what I hope the summer's like and what we can expect. I really believe, and I feel strongly about this, is that Congress should be a leader in showing people how we can go back to work and how we can do it safely. We went back to vote on this bill. I've been back twice during the pandemic to vote. And we were able to go out on the House floor in waves, and we were able to keep ourselves distanced, and we were able to conduct business safely. And I just think it would be a great signal to the American people for Congress to be back in session and at the same time to do it safely. And really, to all of you small business owners, I'd really say the same thing is, boy, be leaders, show how you can conduct business and do it safely, keep your customers safe, and let's show how we can get this open back up. Here's the good news. The way that we're structured as a country means that we get to see 50 different experiments. 50 states are going to do this 50 different ways. Some are being very aggressive about opening up, some are in the middle, and some are being very slow. And we'll be able to take lessons from that. So in my crystal ball, what I see is some states, Georgia, we're going to see them open things up. We're going to see an increase in cases there. We know that. Will it be acceptable is the question. Other states, I talked to a good friend in Chicago, in Illinois yesterday, and they still can't even really go out on the street. And the restrictions are very, very severe. Here in Utah, our governor, I think, has charted a really good course, which is simply making suggestions for stay in place, but not mandating it. And I think you'll see these 50 different models evolve. And then I hope quickly other states can pivot to what they see other states doing that's working, how careful they need to be, how quick they can be to expand.
Perfect. Thank you. Shifting gears a little bit, this may be a little bit more personal. You're not traveling as much. There's been a little bit more downtime. How have you kept yourself busy? Have you picked up any new hobbies? Do you have a new grandchild?
So interestingly, when this started, I got it wrong. I told my wife, wow, I'm going to have a lot of extra time. Go ahead and give me those to-do items around the house. And she made this list, right, like this big. But very quickly, we found as an office that unless we were careful, we would be in a reactive mode. And the only way we could move to a proactive role was to have a daily briefing call with the entire staff, both Washington and Provo, get our to-dos. And I would dare say the last 2-3 weeks, and it's easing just a little bit now, I've been the busiest in my time in Congress because of the need to try to influence the legislation that was coming forward, and then the need to help people understand the legislation that came forward, and just the number of businesses and people that we needed to connect with and to help, if not careful, exceed our ability to do that. So those to-do lists, I kind of made a deal with the wife that we'd spend, this portion of the day doing this, and then as the day wound down, I switch over to those. I'm putting flooring in 2 bathrooms. I've started a little garden. It's tiny. I kept a couple little grow boxes that really is therapeutic for me out in the backyard. Yesterday afternoon, I took some time off. There's some of your folks on the line will be familiar with a canyon called Rock Canyon. And my wife and I took a nice hike up Rock Canyon. It was therapy at the highest level. It was really nice.
Wonderful. It's absolutely essential to have some of those releases.
Exactly.
So you had made mention a little bit earlier about PPP and writing checks on empty account. Can you talk about, as Congress has approved these trillions of dollars with these stimulus packages, where does that money come from? Should we be worried about our national debt? What are the macroeconomic consequences to what we're seeing? From Utah, we're very fiscally conservative. We have a balanced budget amendment. The state, county, and cities must balance their budget. My constituents are starting to grow a little concerned of this exact point. I think everybody understood the first bills that we passed, the massive spending, that we really didn't have a choice. And I think moving forward, we've got to be far more careful with the deficit. I was on a conference call with Larry Kudlow a couple of days ago, and 3 of the congressmen asked him specifically about the debt and how President Trump was viewing this. And he didn't answer any one of those 3 congressmen with a satisfactory answer. Yesterday, I was on a conference call with Steve Scalise and asked him the same question, and he just quickly moved to the need. And so while on one hand, we have this need to spend money, we get it, we've got to do it. And on the other hand,
I'll come back to this analogy of we're writing checks from a bank account that's already overdrawn. And the impact, the weight, the burden of doing that, maybe not on us, but on our children or our grandchildren, really is something that we can't take lightly. And so while we must turn this ship around, we're looking at, 4 or 5 plus trillion dollars added to the deficit this year. It's just not sustainable. And so we've got to get our businesses healthy. We've got to get the ship back on course. But we have to have some serious discussions about reducing this national deficit. My staff is introducing a bill that I really like, and it basically deals with how we pay for national emergencies. Since I've come to Congress, I've seen the hurricanes, Puerto Rico, and the fires and some devastation. And each time Congress is quick to come up with large amounts of money to deal with these. And in a national emergency, nobody asked the question that you just asked. So the bill that we're introducing says it's got to be paid back within 10 years. And that Congress has 2 years after the emergency to figure out how to pay it back. And if it doesn't, it moves to a sequestration mode. Now, with the exception of of the trillions of dollars we're spending, this isn't a big deal. We might spend, $30 billion for a Puerto Rico hurricane relief. If you mandate that that's paid back over 10 years, that's such a tiny amount that we can do that. So we're trying to get Congress thinking in terms of, yes, we need to spend some money, but there has to be some accountability for that at some point where it gets paid back. And hopefully we can get some legs underneath that concept.
Wonderful. Well, good luck with the introduction of that and passage. This next question deals with Postal Service. So eBay as a whole, representing the small businesses, is the #2 user of the Postal Service. So for this individual as a small business owner, I almost exclusively rely on the Postal Service to run my business, hearing a lot about the possibility of rate increases or changes in service or prioritization of parcels. These changes would be disastrous for my business. If these changes take place, how am I supposed to compete against big box companies that have their own shipping capabilities? What's going to happen with the Postal Service? Again, crystal ball, but what do you think?
So one of the fundamental problems with the Postal Service is that Congress has put restraints on them, and we don't let them make good business decisions that they might otherwise make. For instance, we make them set aside money for retirement and actually hold it in a bank account. And we don't require that of other federal agencies. And that's a big ball and chain, around the Postal Service's leg. And so Congress has got to figure out and say, look, if we're going to put these big ball and chains on the Postal Service and not let them act more competitive in a more competitive manner, then we've got to fund them. But my personal choice is to let them be more creative, make some decisions that would make them more competitive, and keep their rates very, very low. And we may need to experiment and don't get too panicked with this, but in rural areas, not delivering every day, right? Maybe we need to look at not delivering on Saturday in rural areas so that they can stay competitive and deliver on the rest of the days to these rural areas. And I believe fundamentally, if the post office is going to be viable, Congress has got to take some of these constraints off of them and let them function a little bit more in that free market world where I do believe they can be competitive. Some of, obviously, the best men and women work for the Postal Service. They're hardworking, they're dedicated, and they want to be a profitable organization. And Congress right now is one of their biggest impediments.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for that. You'd made mention of this a little bit earlier with Governor Herbert and his efforts. So over the weekend, Utah had its Republican convention. It was held virtually, kind of the new normal, which sets up a 4-way race for governor with a June primary. With COVID-19 and the long-term projections for Utah's growth as a state, how should Governor Herbert and the future governor be thinking about kind of the long-term effects on Utah? and third congressional district?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one we should really be all asking. Business owners need to be asking the same question, and I really believe that your small businesses who figure this out are the ones who will look back and say, wow, this was a game changer for me. I think the government needs to look at everything that we do. I've always felt like, how can we expect this rising generation to go to a spot to vote on a predefined day at a predefined location when they know darn well they can buy a home, they can buy a car on their cell phone? Why can't they vote, right, on their cell phone? And I think government needs to figure that out, and this is a good opportunity to do that. Many have commented how clean the air is in Utah the last few weeks. And I think we need to learn from this how much business we can actually conduct without getting in our car to go conduct that. And that would be a very positive outcome from this. We've seen things like, you mentioned that we have 4 candidates. The breaking news is I think we have 5, because a federal court has actually ruled that a 5th candidate who didn't get the required number of signatures is eligible with a lower number of signatures. And so what's really interesting is, as a politician, if I want to end up on the ballot without going through the convention system, I need to gather signatures. And I have to go door to door or person to person to do that. And for governor, that's 28,000 signatures. That's massive. Why can't that be done online, right? Imagine the game changer if that could be done online. And so there's a host of things. And I really think this is a good time for the initiative, for those who are full of initiative, to jump on, seize these moments and realize that this will be different going forward, and buying habits will be different, and paradigms will be different. And how do we capitalize on that?
Perfect. So to that point, how do you see that dynamic in Congress using technology, and then your example of addressing the climate? I mean, certainly opportunities to collaborate with other side of the aisle. How do you see those conversations going?
Well, you mentioned climate specifically. We need to handle climate, immigration, some of these other very, very divisive issues, much like we've handled this. And unfortunately, a good crisis moves people to do things that they should be doing but haven't done. And we need to realize, let's not wait for a crisis on any of these things to find that bipartisan agreement on these very, very critical issues that, if not careful, can become very partisan. Personally, and my team included, we try to talk about things in a way that de-escalate the partisan nature of these bills. And there's certain vocabulary and certain words that if we're not careful when we use, immediately divide us into our groups, into our stereotypes. And I think Congress needs to figure out how to get over that. Now, this may not be your question, but it kind of begs the question of, how can we work better with new technology? Right now, we don't have the rules in place to even vote with technology from a distance. So last week and several weeks before that, a number of us hopped on airplanes when we probably shouldn't have, and we traveled back to Washington, D.C. so that we could vote. And Congress has really not even addressed how we deal with emergencies and how we operate. One of the reasons that this is a difficult thing is Congress is very hesitant to put into place a mechanism for us to conduct business without being face-to-face. I've been told that the partisan nature of Congress started a number of years ago when congressmen stopped living in Washington, D.C., when they stopped going to movies together and their kids stopped playing baseball together. And that's when this partisanship got introduced. And I think a lot of us can see that if we're not face-to-face, if we're not in the same room talking about these difficult issues, that it'll be much more difficult to connect on a bipartisan level. And that's one of the reasons I think you're sensing hesitancy in Congress simply saying, well, let's just go to all remote voting.
Gotcha. Very, very helpful. We've heard of future packages. We've heard President Trump talk about an infrastructure package. How do you see some of those coming together?
Well, because I'm a politician, I like to take the mic the whole time and do all the talking, but Brian is really the expert. And Brian, we're going to let you weigh on this on this one, if you would. And Brian is in DC and feet on the ground. Brian, from your perspective, how would you answer that question? Brian, you're not unmuted. Brian, can you hear me? You need to unmute. There we go.
Yeah, I couldn't unmute myself, but thanks, Congressman. I think, Matt, to your question, I think it seems like there is some division right now about whether or not Congress wants to move forward on a round 4 funding. I think Leader McConnell is really hesitant and wants to get the Senate back to DC for people to have face-to-face discussions, socially distancing, of course. And I'm not sure what the implications are for the House, since the House is no longer meeting next week or will be in session next week. So I think, like the Congressman said earlier, small businesses will continue to be front of mind, and not sure what funding will come from state and local governments, or it will come to state and local governments. But those local municipalities that are really struggling right now should hopefully be receiving funding that was included in the CARES Act to help shore up some revenue shortfalls. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you very much. Thanks, Brian. Congressman, one more question. So it's a very weird time, very difficult circumstances. Sometimes it's hard for people, kind of get bogged down by lack of social interaction, change of routines. What have you heard of any good news stories from your constituents, or what are you hearing from your constituents and how they're keeping up?
Well, that's a great question. I'm really worried that we have not taken into account the mental health of what we're doing. Imagine being alone and not being able to go outside and worrying about your job, worrying about how you're going to pay rent. And I really do think it's a good idea to focus on that, which is good. What I've been so pleased with are the stories everywhere you look about individuals and businesses setting aside their own concerns and helping other people, whether it's product that they don't usually manufacture, that they're going to start manufacturing, or delivering meals to people who can't get outside. Everywhere I look, I hear and see these stories, and it really reminds me that in a time of crisis, that our country, one of the hallmarks of our culture is that we see the best in people coming out. And I just am so pleased that when I hear these stories and read about the businesses in my district who are making donations or switching the product that they make so that they can accommodate those in need. I would guess of those listening today, there's hardly a business out there or an individual who hasn't asked themselves, what can I be doing to lighten the burden of somebody else? And it really is inspiring, and I just really am grateful for those good examples.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So that wraps our questions. Want to thank you for your time. Apparently you are a champion for small business. You're a champion for tech. Thank you very much for taking the time. One more time for folks who may have jumped on late. What's the best way to hear from you and your office? How can people connect with you?
Great question. Best way is to go to curtis.house.gov. And on there, you'll see we do a weekly teletown hall, how to connect with us on there, how to sign up for our newsletter. And for those who have questions that are just not getting answered, our phone number, you can call into our office. And if you don't leave a message, and we'll try to get back to everybody and see if we can help you with your needs.
Real quick, Matt, I'm also happy to share my contact information. Well, you have my contact information, but I can share my cell phone as well. If anyone has questions, they can feel free to send me an email if they're not able to get through to our, I guess, using our main line.
Perfect. We'll make sure that's circulated. And then as well, if you have any questions for eBay, or if we can help facilitate a conversation with the Congressman's office, please email government_relations at ebay.com. As well, we have a COVID-19 dedicated resource page on ebaymainstreet.com, which is helpful with state and local and federal resources. So, Congressman, thank you so much for taking the time. We really appreciate it. Wish you and your family good health and good luck in all that you're doing, and look forward to talking to you soon.
Let's do it again. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.